So I think for my very first demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use NotePad. But before I get started, I want to talk a few things through here. Number one, I'm using Dropbox to store all my files. Now students, you have an access to your OneCloud. You might be using a Mac and have the iCloud access. The advantage to these systems, folks, is the ability for you to save your files to that location and go any place, go home, go to work, be at school, and have access to those files. And I highly recommend that over a jump drive. So in my particular case, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now the next thing that we have to do is create a folder. I've got a folder here that I've created called CIS 111. Now technically, when we create a website is a folder that's made up of all the different files that your website's going to have in it. Your HTML files, we'll talk later about the style sheet files, images, whatever. So that's what I've created right here. The first thing you have to be very careful of, though, if you're going to use File Manager, if you're going to create things on the desktop, is the fact that we're going to use the right-click feature to go back in and create a new item. And in this case, I'm going to create a new text document. So I'm going to use the text editor, which is Notepad, in order to create my HTML document. It doesn't cost a thing, it's built in, but again, it doesn't have a lot of features in it. Now before I go on, if I don't do this correctly, I'm going to have some initial problems. I have to have my file extension showing so that I can rename the file from a TXT extension to an HTML extension. And if I don't have file extensions displayed, I won't know that. So one of the first things I have to do is come over to View and make sure that I have my file extensions turned on so that I can see them. Okay. Now down below here, just to get started, I'm going to do a right click. I'm going to create a new text document. And I'm going to call this text document index.html. And I'll get rid of the .txt file on that. And as soon as I click outside of it, it's going to want me to verify that in fact I am changing that extension. Yes, I do want to change it. It's warning me that I'm going to lose that association. For example, if you have a Word document that ends in a docx, if you change that docx on the end of it, it's very dangerous. It will forget the fact that it's used by Word, and you'll have to manually go back in and load that file, which you don't want to do. But in this case, we're doing exactly what we want to do, so yes, we're prepared for that. And you'll notice that the name of the file changes. It now shows me I'm using Chrome as my default browser, so you'll see the Chrome icon. If you're using a different browser like Firefox, or you're using the Windows, what does Microsoft call theirs now? Edge, then you'll see the Edge icon pop up. So of course I'm going to go ahead and right click on this guy, and I'm going to go and I want to edit this document. So I'm going to open it with, and I'll find Notepad. So right now this file is absolutely empty, and what I'd like to start off with is talking about the most basic tags that every HTML document should have. Now I do want to point out though that there's a little bit of what's called error correction detection built into browsers. That means they'll let you make some slight mistakes, but sometimes those slight mistakes that you make can come back to haunt you. So you want to be very careful about how you build your tags. So let's go ahead and get started. It's going to be a couple of moments before we can go back in and actually take a look and see what that page is going to look like. But the most basic tag that we're going to put in is going to be the HTML tag. So we always start off with HTML as our what we call an opening tag. Now tags in HTML are what we call double-sided. There's an opening tag typically and another tag that says I'm done. So the HTML tag says here comes an HTML document, and then at the very end I need to provide another tag that says the HTML document is done, and by doing that I'm simply going to put a slash in front of the tag. So the first tag that we see up at the top here is the opening HTML tag, and this bottom tag down here is the closing HTML tag. So again, almost all tags are going to be double-sided like this. There are some shortcuts that I will show you here in a little while, but for right now, let's stick with the fact that they all have to be double-sided. Now, we have what's called a parent-child relationship with tags. That means that tags can have tags within them. And the most parent tag that exists is the HTML tag. And inside the HTML tag, we're going to have two children tags that are possible. So let's go ahead and put those in there. The first child tag that we have is what's referred to as the head tag. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in the head tag. And again, I'm going to close that head tag out. Now, although it's not required, one of the things that I like to do, and you're going to find out that many editors will do as well, is I like to indent a couple of spaces each one of the child tags. Okay. So my HTML tag is made up of an opening and closing head tag, and below that opening and closing head tag, we're going to have the body tag. And again, we're going to close that body tag out the same way. Now let's talk about what these two tags offer us. First of all, the head tag is where we're going to place a lot of the information about the HTML document that other people aren't going to see. We can put some what we'll refer to later as meta tag information that might exist inside there. We can put the title of the HTML document that's going to appear within the browser within that head tag. But whatever goes in the head tag is more descriptive of the document itself. Anything that we're going to code, though, within that browser window, anytime you go out and you look at a web page, that information is going to be enclosed between the body tags. So the vast majority of the work that we're going to do within this course we'll be doing within that set of body tags. Now before we go on, let's go ahead and let's simply save our document. I'm going to do a File, Save, and since I opened that document I don't have to do anything else. I don't have to do a Save As. Now I'd like to see the results of this document. So I'm simply going to come back to my file manager. That's the one where we originally created it. I'm going to double click on that file and it's going to open it up in Chrome. Let's try that again. How do I want to open this file? I want to open it in Chrome. Now, as of right now, this is my entire HTML document. You'll notice I have nothing within the body of the document. So let me close that page out. Let's jump back over to that document that was just open here, and let's add a little bit of information to it. So another element of the head tag, which is considered a basic tag, is the title. Now the title is what's going to appear right up in this area. In fact, if I don't provide a title, by default the name of the file is going to become the title. And look what's happened over here. Here's the document that I just exposed. There was no title that existed, so it threw the name of the file up here. Notice that these two things match. So let's change that a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in title here. And one of the more proper ways to do it, I don't want to say proper, probably another technique to do it, is probably to spell it correctly, is to go ahead and do it all on the same line. So I might put in here, let's do my first HTML doc, something like that. And then I'm going to close it out, because remember, we have to have, up to this point, opening and closing tags. So I'm simply going to come back over. I'm going to do a File, Save. That saves the source code that we just wrote. Come back to my browser. I don't have to reload from scratch again. I can simply press my F5 key or do a right click on here and say reload. And notice what happens. I now have my title at the top of my page. So that's our first magic. Let's go back and take a look at what we can do next. Now before I go on, folks, what we're looking at right now, with the exception of this information right here, these are your most basic HTML tags. Every document is going to have those basic tags that exist out there. You can have any title that you want in there. So what we're going to take a look at next we're going to look at some individual tags that we can use. But before I do that, I need to talk about one more element that probably should be considered a basic tag, although it's not really a tag. It's what's referred to as a browser directive. So at the very top of your document, up until recently, we had this element that we called a DocType, and it was an extremely large bit of information we had to copy to every page that existed out there. When it came out with the modifications of HTML5, they listened to what a lot of developers had to say, and the complaint was all this extraneous stuff that you have to type at the top is meaningless. All we need is to have a little bit of information that tells it that this is an HTML5 document. All that extra stuff that we had before might describe an HTML or an XHTML document, which was an earlier version of HTML, or HTML 3.0 document. But thankfully, what they've done is they've added one thing at the top of the document we have to add in here. It's called the DocType. And all I do is type in DocType, just like that, space, HTML in lowercase, and a closing bracket. Now, the reason we don't, again, call that a basic tag is because it's not a tag. That is what's going to tell my Chrome, my Firefox, any of my browsers out there that it's supposed to use an HTML5 interpretation of the code that it's going to follow. So what you see here right now is what I would expect you to be able to, if not memorize, at least to be able to pull out of your hat real quickly. So let's continue on, and we're going to add a little bit more information to this. So I'm going to return back here and say hello world, because that's what we all do in the geek world, is we start off with what's called a hello world document. Okay, that's going to be my title. I'll prove that. Let's save it. Let's jump back over, and in fact, as long as I'm at it, let's make this a little bit easier to look at. We can play around with this. Let's resize our browser window here, just like this. Okay, and that way we don't have to jump back and forth. So I've got my browser window open on the right, I've got NotePad open on the left hand side. And by the way, if you don't know where to find NotePad, it's one of those basic Windows features. You can go back down to the bottom, type in NotePad, it'll pop open. One of the things I did is I added NotePad to my browser bar down at the bottom, or excuse me, my bar at the bottom, so I can click into it real quickly. So obviously this is not over here on the right side the refresh version of the left, because it should be saying hello world up here. So let me make sure that I save this, jump back over here, and I'm going to do a refresh. Reload, I should say. And there it is, hello world. So let's come down here and talk about what we can do within the body. Now normally, as we're going to find out, we just put text information inside of the body tag, and we're going to let cascading style sheets later and maybe a little bit of JavaScript magic do all the cool formatting that we might have on a screen. But there are some initial format features that we can get within the initial HTML body tag. So let's take a look at some common ones. Pardon me. The first thing I want to look at is what's referred to as a heading tag. So a heading tag is a H1 tag through an H6. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to type in H1, and I'm going to close it out, because remember, we have an opening tag and we have a closing tag. Okay, so I'm going to close my H1 out, and I'm going to go back in and add information into the middle of this. Okay, so right in the middle between the tags, now notice the brackets, how they're set up. I should have talked a little bit more about that. This less than and greater than bracket that surrounds the tags. Okay, so an H1 is a heading tag. It's a predefined tag. It has a certain feature built into it. Let's take a look at what it's going to do for us. So I'm going to type in here, this is CIS 111, and at that point I'm going to go ahead and save it. Notice I could have done a Control S as well. I'm going to come back over here, do a right click, and I'm going to reload. And notice what happened. It gave me the same information I had right here, within a larger font that exists over here on the right-hand side. So that's what heading tag does. It's a pre-formatted tag that allows me to put oftentimes tags or titles or what have you in, but there's more than that. Let me go ahead and add another one down below it here. And again, notice that the H1 is a child tag of the body tag. So although it's not required, I like to indent because it makes my code look a little bit easier. And again, you'll see that some of the editors will do that automatically for you. So let me come back in here and I'm going to add an H2 tag in here. Okay, and on this H2 tag, I'm going to come back in and say HTML5, and I'm going to close that tag out, just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now let's refresh this tag and see what we end up with. Reload. And now notice that I've got similar text, but it's a little bit smaller. And in fact, I can pick between an H1 tag, which is the largest default text that exists, all the way down to an H6 tag. Let's take a look at what H6 gives me. Okay, again, save. Come back over here and I will reload. And look at the tiny different text that pops in. Now before I go on, I do want to point out that most cases later you're probably not going to use the heading tags very much because you'll be able to go back out there with style sheets and make it do whatever you want. You're not going to let your HTML depend upon how you format your document. And in this case, that's what the H1 does, is it's a pre-formatted. You'll notice that the font is large and bold on an H1 or it's small and thinner on that H6. And just before we go on, let's just take a look at a middle size, just so I can show you. Let's look at an H3. Okay, save. And come back over here and let's refresh. Okay. So you see there's a middle-sized font. And by the way, if I come back over here and I do a right click, one of the things I can do is I can view my page source. My page source is going to bring open basically this same code that exists over here. Let's take a look at it. You see how I open the same basic code up. This is not for editing. I can't edit this code over here, but it will show me the code that is generated from the page that I'm looking at. So if I was to go, for example, to scc.spokane.edu, okay, bring that page open, okay, I could then go back in and say show me the page source. And again, don't let this code blow you away, but there's a whole bunch of code in here. At the point of this page right here, this is not a well-written website by today's standards when it was created way back when it was, and perhaps by the time you're seeing this we'll have a new website out. I know it's in process right now. So let me close these out right here, and let's jump back over and take a look at a couple of other features. So we've thus far we've looked at the basic tags, we've looked at the HTML, the head, and the body tags. I've showed you the title tag, and the title tag is how we produce the information it shows at the top. The title is also used, by the way, by some search engines. So you want to put a title in there that is going to be meaningful for the page. And later we'll talk a little bit more about search pages and how you might want to optimize your document. But right now, we're going to take a look at probably one of the more important aspects of an HTML page, and that's a paragraph. So in order to put a paragraph in, it's a very simple tag. It's the P tag, just like that. So I'm going to put an opening P and a closing P tag in. And now, in between this text, I can type in all my paragraph information that I want. One of the advantages about the paragraph tag, and in fact, I should go on further, and as we look at this paragraph, I want you to note that the paragraph and the heading tags will function identically. And in fact, I like to think about the heading tags as simply a special version of a paragraph tag. One that's really small, one that's a little bit larger, or one that's really, really large if I want to utilize that. But the heading tags and the paragraph tags, they're what we refer to as responsive. And responsive says that that paragraph is only going to be as wide as the browser window that you're inspecting it within. So let me give you an example, and I'm not the fastest typist in the world, but let me take a look and throw a little bit of text out here. Continent, a new nation. Go ahead and leave it at that. So that's part of the Gettysburg Address. Let me make sure I've got this. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation. Now notice that I have wraparound that existed inside the HTML document. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like it is. I'm going to save this guy. Save. And I'm going to jump back over to this page and I'm going to refresh it. Now, notice what happened with my text. It just stretched right across that page. But I want to demonstrate that term responsive because you're going to hear that as we go along through this entire program, responsive design, because you want to write a website that can be viewable on a desktop computer like I'm showing you right now, as well as a smartphone. And you don't want to have to write different versions of a website. So responsive talks about the ability to make a web page look, they may look slightly different, but as far as the content, they're going to have the same content in the wraparound. And let me show you what happens here. So if I take this document that I have and I'm going to start shortening it down, simulating a smartphone, if you will. Watch what happens. Look how that text starts wrapping around. Now there's a certain point where it's going to stop. But at anything smaller than that, you're looking at it on smaller than the smallest iPhone or smartphone out there. You're probably looking at a watch face. But again, look as I resize that. So that's the feature that you're going to get out of a paragraph. And in fact, that same feature exists within heading tags. Let me show you. If I was to take this paragraph tag over here and let's change that back into a large heading 1 right here, and I hit save right there, let's jump back over and this text is going to jump large. Reload it and there you go. So you'll see that that heading tag functions just like a paragraph. And you're going to find later that anything that I can do with a paragraph, I pretty much can do with a heading tag. And heading tags, for the most part, once you become a better developer, will start disappearing, and you're going to create your own custom tags, and that's part of the extensibility of HTML. So I want to back up and show you a couple of other things here. So let me change that back to a paragraph right here. And I want to show you lists. Now, one of the nice features about HTML is the fact that it organizes information. And there's two different types of lists that we could create. So the first list I want to show you is what's referred to as an ordered list. And in fact, that's just simply an OL tag, ordered list. So I'm going to move across, show you this OL here. So I've got an opening and closing tag on the top. Now, what an ordered list does is it says, I'm going to have some elements that I want to list out on the screen, kind of like a sequential 1, 2, 3, if you will, and I want to show a precedent. So in order to put elements in an ordered list, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back across here and I'm going to do an LI. And a LI is basically stands for a list item here. So let's assume that within this list I'm going to put fruits in here. So I'm going to put a pear, and I got to close the LI out. Okay. I'm going to do another LI. We'll put a peach in here. Okay, and a closing LI here. And then I'm going to put an apple. Now, oops, let's try doing that right. Okay. Now let's take a look and see what resolves. I'm going to save it, jump across over here, refresh, reload, and voila. Notice what it did. Oh, except I have a typo in here. Notice how I've got right after peach, I have that bracket. Let's go back and find out. Ah, right there. Right there. Let's take that bracket out, resave, and let's refresh. So notice what it did. It added in the items and it numbered them automatically for me. If I was to add another item in here, in fact, let's put one in between. We'll add a grape. Save. Come back over here and reload. And again, pear, peach, grape, apple, pear, peach, grape, and apple, and they're automatically numbered. Now later we'll find out we can modify the way that they're numbered, how they look, but for right now we're going to keep it simple. That's what's referred to as an ordered list because it has a specific order, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in this example. There's also another kind of list called an unordered list, and I'm just going to take the code that we have on the screen right here and I'm going to modify it just as we have it. So an unordered list, just like that, just change that OL to a UL, save it. I can come back over here and I can reload, and now you'll notice that they're bulleted. That's the unordered means there's no precedent behind it. They're just in a particular layout, so there's no order why apple falls below pear, whereas when I had an ordered list, there's some sequential reason, perhaps, that they're that way. Now, within here, we can do quite a bit of information. We're going to talk later about thinking outside the box, but for right now, let's leave these as our basic tags. The things that I would expect you to be able to do within your very first assignment would be to go back in, use HTML document. In fact, create an HTML document by going back in, creating a folder, doing a right click on that, adding in a new text document, changing the extension to HTML. You can go back and review this again, and then editing the document out as we see here. So one of the suggestions that I have is just play around with it. The worst case that you're going to do is mess up your HTML, and there's not a lot here to mess up. And you'll have to enter it back in again. The best thing that you're going to do is learn, and that's what this is all about, folks. So thanks a lot.